Hi, I'm Dennis McKinnon. I'm a member of the 𝗗𝗲 tribe, and we're here in Blue Lake Rancheria, and I'm 75 years old. My great-grandmother, Nellie McKinnon, she was an accomplished basket maker, as many were in that time, just out of necessity because that's what they used living off the land. But then she started doing decorative things too as it came to the 1900s. That passed on to my grandmother, Nettie McKinnon, and so the skills that passed on to her, you can kind of see the transition where they pick up. Her baskets are worldwide. She's in the Smithsonian, she's in state museums, she's museums all over, and the Clarke Museum has about 40 of her baskets. So my mother, Dorothy McKinnon, she was born in 1924. She decided she was going to learn how to make baskets at the age of 50. So she would travel up to 𝗗𝗲 every week and sit with my grandmother and all the basket weavers, visit each other, and that's how the tradition was passed down. And my mother would sit there, and they would be these basket makers in somebody's house, and they'd just be making baskets, and she said if I made a mistake, they'd just pull it out of your hand and change it for you and give it back, and that's how you learned. She did that for a year or so and came back, and then she started honing her skills. And then my dad had a heart bypass, he had a stroke, he had some other health problems, so she spent quite a few years taking care of him, not being able to gather materials anymore. So at that point, she transitioned from traditional 𝗗𝗲 designs and learned how to do pine needle basketry. There's a transition that she did, same shapes, and tried to mimic the designs as best she could because it's a different skill level in pine needles, but then she could buy pine needles commercially and the other materials, and it was easier on her hands. She was in her 80s then, so traditional basketry is real hard on basket makers' hands and their mouth because they use their mouth a lot. But pine needles are a little easier, so she had quite a career just in pine needle basketry. You know, all during this period, I'm watching her, and I'd watch my grandmother when I could and things, and seeing their skill level. And it was interesting to watch basket makers because I figured out after a while, I said, these people are meditating. My mother would sit there, or my grandmother. If I went and visited my grandmother when I was younger, she'd be just sitting there making baskets. She'd lost her vision, and she still made baskets. She couldn't see. I'd have to announce myself when I came in because she said, who are you? Which one are you? You know, she had a lot of grandkids. So. But my mother would sit there and we'd be talking and they'd just be making, and by herself, she would just sit there, and it's just this, you could see it, this calmness. So once I kind of broke that barrier where I could look at things differently and look at our traditional baskets differently and translate it into wood is what I tried to do. So, you know, I want to take this art where I can start developing my own using the same geometry and the same design features of traditional. And I believe that's what basket makers did, the same thing. They would make a basket, somebody would look at it and say, well, I'm going to make it this way, and I'm going to make mine this way, and it would just pass on down the line. The shop we're sitting in now, my dad and I built this 40 years ago. So I had built buildings and decks and shops and bookcases and furniture and a lot of other things. And after I retired, I started doing finer woodwork. And I just picked up a scroll saw one day because I'd never had one before. And I actually started making some bowls by hand, just with a scroll saw and sandpaper. And so I started pursuing how to do some of this, what's called segmented woodworking, which are like putting pieces together in puzzles. We did all kinds of things to represent the tribal designs that we had and the methodology a little bit, because I knew I was never going to make baskets. It was usually done by women in our tribe. One of the things I noticed as I started doing this, basket makers would get sticks, willow sticks, hazel sticks, grasses, and they have these bundles of sticks, and they take those and make an object. When I start these out, I have a bundle of sticks, and I manage them different than a basket maker, but when I started holding those, I had sticks in my hand, and I went, it really kind of puts me in that same realm with them, you know, not as an accomplished basket maker, but the process of doing that and gathering them and using sticks and to make an object at the end, it's very meditative for me to do, even though there's loud noise with saws and various things. But when I'm doing this or sitting here sanding them and working with them, it's meditation. It feels the same way, just personally. When you finish one of these, and you can, just like a basket, you can hold it and touch it. And when I give them away to people, I don't sell them. I give them to people. They're afraid to touch them. And I said, it's a piece of wood, you know, like basketry, and so it has meaning. They can feel it. And so it's important to pass that on.